I'm Doug McAllister for Journey Fellowship Church, and today I want to tell you a story. So Miss Rachel and I have been on a sabbatical for the whole month. We were out of town, and I have a collection of stories. I kept a journal when I was gone of the stories just so I could remember what I wanted to tell you. Took a lot of pictures and wrote down some notes, learned some interesting things, had some fun. But before I get into the story today, I want to kind of tell you our philosophy about sabbaticals. Of course, when God created the earth on the seventh day after the 6 days of creation, he rested. And I believe that is a principle of human existence that we have to build in times to rest. But then in Leviticus 25, when Moses was getting the design for the new government of the nation of Israel, the Lord gave him a very clear direction about a sabbatical year, especially when you're farming or raising cattle and other things. And you can read the whole thing in Leviticus 25 on your own. But basically the story was work for 6 years, and then on the seventh year, take a sabbatical. Let the land rest and let the farmers rest. So we took that principle of every 7 years, and of course we didn't follow exactly take a whole year like Moses did. But when our church was very young, we decided that every 7 years we'd give our pastors a month off with no responsibility, a month with pay to go to do whatever they wanted to do, to take a vacation, to stay home and read and sleep, or to take a class, or whatever. Gave them opportunity just to be away from their responsibility. And it kind of got ingrained into our Journey culture. So now this is our 27th year pastoring and serving here at Journey. So this is our, I guess, going on our fourth sabbatical, third or fourth, I forget, I've lost count now, that we've done this every 7 years. Rachel and I have taken a sabbatical. That's a whole month of that year that we were away from ministry. And it's been really good for us. You know, our kids were home for the first couple, and we took them with us, and we did things. One year we stayed at a lake house. A friend of ours owned a lake house, and we stayed there for most of the month. And we did a month in Sevierville, Tennessee one year. And this past month, actually, this sabbatical, we were in Kentucky for part of it, and then in Pigeon Forge for the rest of it. So that's kind of our philosophy of ministry, sabbatical-wise, for our pastors and staff. But the older I get, I was thinking before I left, if I do this every 7 years, next time I'm going to be 67 years old, and that's a big number. So I talked to our elders, and I think I'm going to move my sabbatical to every 4 years. I just want to squeeze in a few more. If Jesus doesn't come, I want to make sure that we have some time away to do some fun stuff together. So we'll probably take another sabbatical in 4 years from now. But let me tell you a couple stories. I'm going to tell you one today, and then I'll tell you a story each week for the next couple of weeks from the sabbatical. The first story I'm going to tell you happened in Kentucky. So Rachel and I booked a whole month at a cabin in Tennessee, but the cabin wasn't available until February the 4th. So we had 3 days to fill before we could get to our cabin. And Rachel said, "What do you want to do for those first 3 days that we don't have a cabin?" And I said, "Well, let's do something around the same area, but maybe, something that we haven't done before." And she suggested, "Why don't we go to Williamstown, Kentucky, and visit the Ark Encounter?" And man, when she said that, it was like, absolutely, that is a great idea. That's a God idea. So we went on and we found a house on VRBO. Now, the Ark Encounter is in a small town, which is very interesting. I really appreciate Ken Ham and Answers in Genesis and their vision. They built this ministry in a small town. Now, the Ark Encounter sits on 800 acres. It's massive. I have a picture of it. I'll show you the Ark. We took a shot of it from about 100 yards away. It's built to the dimensions in Genesis. It's a massive boat. And then I'll show you a close-up of Rachel standing right near the boat so you can kind of get an idea of just how large this ark is. So it's in Williamstown, Kentucky, a small town. It's on 800 acres, so the encounter is probably bigger than the town. But Rachel found this little house, and I have a picture of the house I'm going to show you in a second. She found this little house in Williamstown. It's right on Main Street. So it's like a Norman Rockwell painting. And boy, that's a really old phrase. If you remember who Norman Rockwell was, the painter who used to do the cover of the Saturday Evening Post during the 20th century, one of the most famous artists of my childhood. But it was like a picturesque little wood frame house right on Main Street, and it was cold. Sometimes the temperature was down in single digits. Most of the time we were there, it was 15 to 20 degrees. And I walk every morning. One of my goals for the year, and we set goals every January, but one of my goals for the year is to walk 500 miles this year. That sounds like a lot, but it's about 1.25 miles a day, so it's not really that much of a deal. But while I was in Kentucky, in 15-degree weather, I had to talk myself out of chickening out a couple of times. Man, I had to put on some layers, some boots, and some hats and gloves. And I did my 1.5 miles. Some days I did 3 miles. So I'm on track to walk 500 miles this year. So every morning I'd get up around daylight, watch the sun come up, and then walk my 1.5 to 3 miles. And man, I found a really couple of interesting points in that little town. There's a monument there right near the city hall of all of the soldiers that have died from Williamstown in every war. And early one morning, when I found that monument, it just really, not only was it cold, but it, just a moment of seeing all those men and women who gave their life in wars for the last 200 years. Man, it just took my breath away. And I could just think of those, some of those kids were 18 and 19 years old who went off to World War I or World War II, or some of the others along the way that never came home. You think of all the destinies and all the blood and all the lives that just never materialized because they gave their life in service to the country. It was a special moment. I think I have a photo of that monument too. I'll show you that. But it was just one of those moments, man, that really just captured my heart. So I'm walking back from the monument. It's 15 degrees that morning, and I'm in the little downtown area, and there's restaurants, little mom and pop restaurant, everything. There's no chain restaurants anywhere. There's not a McDonald's, not a Burger King, not a Wendy's. They're all hometown, mom and pop shops. So we passed by this one. It was hometown barbecue. So I said, you know what? I'll eat dinner here tonight. So we came back that night and we got takeout for dinner from the barbecue. And then the next night, we went to, there's a local a hamburger place, and it was, I can't think of the name of it, man. I think I do have it written down somewhere, but I'll tell you the name. If I find the picture, I'll show it to you. But it was a local family that sells handmade hamburgers, and they use local Kobe beef that they've imported and and turned it into to ground meat. And we had a Kobe beef burger for dinner that night. Oh my gosh. It may be the best burger I've ever had in my life. It was amazing. Just this little small town shop. But then the days we'd spend at the Ark. So the first 2 days, I got up and we went over to the Ark, and it was about 5 minutes away from where we were living. And the Ark encounter could probably one day be as large as an amusement park. It could be a Six Flags or a Dollywood or a small Disney, because it's 800 acres. It's a massive site. And I saw the blueprint of the vision, and there's a huge vision they have laid out for the future. I don't know how long it's going to take them to build it, but it's a massive vision. But the Ark is already built. It's built to the specs in the Bible in Genesis. It's as big as a football field, tall as a 3 or 4 story building, and just massive. And I spent the whole day in the Ark reading It's a museum slash interactive slash presentation. There's a live auditorium where they do, presentations. There's, all kinds of, there's a restaurant on the site and then exhibits on every level of the ark all the way through the whole thing. But we just learned so much, how the Bible is true from the very first verse. I know you don't doubt that, neither do I, but it's just so good to see someone take so much time just to go through the effort to rebuild what the Bible describes, that we can see and touch with our eyes and our hands, that, hey, this is real. And according to some really smart people who know about shipbuilding, the dimensions of that boat in Genesis would float, it would be seaworthy, and it could survive a tsunami because it's built to the very exact proportions that a ship that size would have to be in order to be seaworthy. How did Noah know how to build that boat? Thousands of years before there was a boating industry, before anybody else had built a boat. It had never rained before. How did Noah have the wisdom to design that boat to the exact specifications that it needed to be in order to float? We know that it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. The judgment of God came upon the earth. Every person on the planet was killed in the flood, including all the animals, except for the ones that were in the ark. So that's a great teaching about the coming of Christ and the judgment of God. God is a loving God, but he's also a very just God. And it reminds us of the fear of God. We fear no one but God, because in the end, life and death are in his hands. And so we spent 2 days at the ark. And then the third day, and I may have split it up, one day at the ark, one day at the Creation Museum, and then the third day at the ark. I think that's how I did it. Ark, Creation Museum, ark. But we went up to the Creation Museum. It's about 45 minutes north of Williamstown. It's right outside of the Cincinnati airport. It's also in a small town. In fact, it's not even in a town. It's on an exit, a rural exit of the interstate. But the Creation Museum is a sister property to the Ark Encounter, both built and maintained and staffed by Answers in Genesis and Ken Ham and an incredible ministry team. But the Creation Museum is more of a museum. I mean, it was full of information. There were exhibits to see. There were plaques to read. There was lectures to attend. There was a I can't think of the name of the thing when you go and sit down and look at the sky. What is that called? Observatory. Yeah, observatory. Thank you. Yeah, so there's an observatory. You can go in, and it's a big room. It holds about 100 people, but the ceiling is nothing but the sky, the universe at night, and they point out to you all the planets and the stars and the alignments, and then there was an auditorium that probably would seat a couple of thousand people in the auditorium, and they offer lectures all day long from some of the most learned scientists in the world, people who graduated from Harvard and Yale and MIT, who are all on staff there and who are all Bible-believing Christians. You may not know that there's that many scientists in the world that are Bible-believing Christians who love Jesus and who love God's Word. And they'll spend the whole day just teaching out of the Bible the truth about history and geography and astronomy and all of the things that, we learn about in the Bible. They kind of make it come alive for you. So we spent, 3 days there. And on the fourth day, we decided to, finish up our visit, and we drove from Williamstown to Pigeon Forge to get into our cabin. And it's not that far of a drive. It seems like a longer distance. So from Knoxville to Williamstown was about 3 hours or so. That's an estimate. So we were on our way to the Smokies, and at Knoxville, you just go north into Kentucky. And we passed right by the exit where the Asbury Seminary is, and that was right before the revival broke out. Had I known that, I would have stopped by there to be part of that revival, but I didn't know about it until I got back. So it's about 3 hours north of Knoxville. So we drove the 3 hours south, got back into Knoxville, and then we went to Pigeon Forge, and we stayed there for the balance of the month. But that was how we spent our first couple of days on sabbatical, in Williamstown and visiting the Ark and visiting the Creation Museum and kind of just unwinding and relaxing. So that's the story I want to tell you today about sabbatical. We'll pick it up next time we're together. I'm Doug McAllister for Journey Fellowship Church. Check us out at jf.church or check out the Journey Fellowship Church app for more stuff about us. See you next time.